Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a video and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Today, I have with me a person who calls himself a citrus farmer but is actually a very, very senior agricultural leader, Mr. Ajay Veer Jakhar. Ajay, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Ajay is the chairman of the Bharat Krishak Samaj, which is the Farmers Forum of India. As I mentioned, he calls himself a citrus farmer based in Punjab, and he writes regularly for various newspapers. So, Ajay, tell me, what would you say are three key milestones in your life or your career?
I would say I was born, I was educated, I got married,
Okay,
and I have a son. Those would be my personal milestones in life.
terrific.
And around 10 years ago, I got into the space of advocating policies for farmers, and taken a taken a life of its own, and that's what I do full time now, and that's been a real milestone, and it's a very positive milestone on what I'm doing.
Okay,
And just recently this year, the United Nations has decided to have a United Nations Food Systems Summit in September of 2021,
okay,
and they have 5 tracks. Of the 5 tracks, each of the tracks has a chair and a vice chair. So I've been fortunate to be appointed the vice chair for track 2, which is on sustainable consumption patterns. And as a milestone, I would say that's really interesting because of the 10 chairs and vice chairs, I'm the only farmer in the whole world who's there advocating on behalf of farmers. And this is exactly what our organization, Bharat Krishak Samaj, wanted to do: is advocate policies, be at the policy table, and make policies which would bring equity into the system and help farmer prosperity.
wonderful. So, Ajay, let's talk a little bit about the Bharat Krishak Samaj. Tell me about the scope of work of this organization.
So, Bharat Krishak Samaj is a farmers' organization formed in 1955. It's changed a lot since the time it formed, but basically, we advocate policies for farmer prosperity, and we do that by creating platforms where we get people, like-minded people, diverse people who are interested in improving lives of farmers. We get them on platforms. We try to build a consensus, and we try and make the policy forward.
Okay,
Just to make you understand what we do is, if you've seen this Christopher Nolan movie Inception, with Leonardo DiCaprio in the lead,
correct.
what's it about? It's about an idea. They say, what is most resilient? Is it a parasite, a bacteria, a virus, a worm? What is it? It's an idea which is highly contagious.
Okay,
So can we take an idea and put it into a policymaker's mind? Can we take an idea and put it into a politician's mind? And we allow it to grow there, take hold in that person's brain and let him own the idea. And if we are able to do that as a policy advocacy organization, I think so we've achieved what we wanted to achieve, because then they become carriers of that idea and they take it forward.
wonderful. I mean, there are a lot of debates going on about farmers these days, but tell me, what are some of the key issues farmers face in India?
I think so what farmers face in India is also what they face in much of the developing world,
Okay.
which is that income coming off the farm is not enough to support the families now.
Correct.
And that's the basic problem. So they cannot make enough from their small holdings with which they can support their families in a dignified manner. And second is that because they have no savings, and if somebody is to fall ill in the family, it's a huge problem. The debt they have to take to look after the elderly, or to educate the children, or the quality of education, this I would say is the second big problem that farmers face, other than not having a profitable profession. And third is that they're losing hope, and hope is fading, and they do not know. They're so uncertain about their children's future, the bleak future that they have, that it just gnaws them completely all the time, gnaws at them.
So, as someone who has never been a farmer, which is me, I have often seen that since independence, every political party keeps saying something needs to be done. Every party promises but does not deliver. What seems to hold us back? I mean, they're the largest constituency of our country.
I would say that 2-3 things, to quickly summarize, to put it into just a few bullet points, is there's a worldwide infatuation of trying to get affordable food to consumers. And it's achieved by suppressing farm gate prices, which is the root problem of economic policy.
Correct.
And this suppression of prices is leading to malnutrition, it's leading to poverty, it's leading to a migration from rural to urban areas. It's not self-correcting at all. And this is what is called food politics, of how resources are allocated for consumers at the cost of farmers. And economists don't understand it, politicians don't understand it. The second big problem is with the bureaucracy and the government. They're so fixated on outcomes that they don't design processes to achieve those outcomes. And that's why the outcomes fail. And you will normally hear in India when bureaucracy, when officers talk, or when you see government officials talk, they will always say it was a very good policy, but implementation failed. Rubbish, it's absolute rubbish. It's the policy which does not take into account the ground realities that the implementation failed. So I really think these are terms that have been going on for decades, and they are absolutely wrong. And so this is one of them. They have a superiority complex. Those who are elected and those who make policy, they do not listen to stories. And this is exactly what's happened to the 3 farm laws that are in conflict with farmers today.
Correct.
And the sad story of farmer distress is a story of sheer governance failure in our country.
That's very unfortunate. But again, tell me, Ajay, from a situation in the 60s when we were used to get PL 480 grains to a situation today when we have more than enough food for a much larger population. We are constantly told our warehouses are absolutely full. We are exporting food grains. The condition of the farmer hasn't changed. It may have deteriorated. Someone has benefited in this huge increase in food. Where is all the benefit going, and why is the farmer not getting anything?
So there are 2 different parts of it. Increasing agriculture production is not the same as increasing or improving farmer prosperity or allowing him a dignified life. They're 2 different things. For the life of farmers to improve, what is required is we need higher wages. People have more incomes, you need higher wages. They will buy fruits, vegetables, they will change their diets, they will buy more nutritious food, and that will allow for higher farm gate prices. We need the economy to improve, we need industries and service sector to come up. So there are meaningful jobs for people to, come out of farming, out of farm jobs. So a lot of the solutions that we want for farmers don't lie on the farm. They lie in the larger economic policy space. And we are not a food secure country. Let me just come back to the point that you said we are food. I think we are a very food insecure country. We are a cereal surplus country. Let's put it this way.
Okay.
Consumption of fruits and vegetables is probably fruits, vegetables, proteins, meat and eggs is probably one of the least in the world. We do not meet average standards of any place on earth. If the economy was to improve, that would increase the demand for nutritious food, and we will never be able to meet it. So it's a great fallacy that policymakers have. English media print media and TV media are propagating this thing that we are a food secure country. I think so they've gone off their hats. And they're creating a bigger mess. They are incepting wrong ideas into the into the minds of the middle class and the larger urban constituency they cater to.
Wow, that is an incredible learning for me on our conversation. But you just mentioned that there should be higher wages. Wages are given to employees.
Yes.
Farmers are independent. How will that happen?
No, wages not for employees, wages for everyone in the country. Salaries, wages, incomes must go up. Only when you have spare income will you buy fruits and vegetables.
Oh, absolutely.
If you don't have higher incomes or surplus income, you will only be focusing on cereals. You will be food secure. You will have calories, but you will not have nutrition.
Okay, I understand. I misunderstood. So again, let's come to the farmer from Punjab and Haryana. Traditionally, the Punjab farmer and Haryana farmer were traditionally called the grain basket of the country. They fed the entire country. But that has started to shift, and a lot of other states have started to take over that. Why is this happening? And, is it, for what reason are the farmers of Punjab and Haryana not getting the same kind of importance that they used to?
So you look at it, Punjab and Haryana were benefited from the Green Revolution. Initially, they benefited from the Green Revolution.
Correct.
The country wanted them to do a certain kind of farming and with certain kind of agriculture practices, which they adopted very willingly. This was new technology at that time. We adopted this new technology, but those benefits are petering out. Cereal production has increased in other parts of the country. The country wanted wheat and rice. The country still wants wheat and rice. It's just that other places have started growing wheat and rice. So there's less demand for wheat and rice from Punjab. Punjab suffered growing this wheat and rice because the central government policy directed them to grow this wheat and rice. They incentivized this kind of thing. Now farmers find the transformation painful. They find change elusive, and they feel threatened that the way of life they have got used to is going to become worse.
Okay.
And if you look at it, what is the problem with other states in Punjab? The other states, most of the other states have got some way where they get revenue from natural resources, from coal, iron, and other materials, maybe oil and other things. Punjab does not have those revenues. And the genesis of the problem that we face today lies in the terrorism that came into 1980s. It devastated the economy. The savings that people had in the state went out of the state, and we never have been able to come out of it. By the time terrorism was brought under control, not by central government, but by the people of Punjab, by the police of Punjab,
Correct.
the central government came up with a policy of giving incentives to adjoining hill states to industrialize them. So when that period of economic liberalization came after Mr. Manmohan Singh and Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji came, by that time the incentives were not there for Punjab, for industry to come to Punjab. So existing industry migrated to hill states because of income tax and excise incentives. New industry did not come there. So we actually missed the bus. We could not diversify incomes. Everybody talks about diversifying your agriculture. I'm saying we could not diversify incomes. We could not diversify the way employment was being generated. And that's the genesis of the problem. The central government has been lacking in supporting Punjab to make that painful transformation less painful and mitigate the distress.
So then, if one just looks at what is currently being grown in, say, Punjab, which is the rice and wheat predominantly, how do we ensure that the Punjab farmer, the Haryana farmer, gets a bigger chunk of the farm to fork revenue, so to speak?
So I want to come back again to this point of farm to fork, and it's a term that I find being used in the food systems approach the world over by multilateral agencies, by the United Nations, by FAO, by industry. You yourself have been in the industry. I think so. It's a great misnomer. Farmers don't grow what they want to grow. They only grow what the consumers demand and what government policy incentivizes them to do. So actually, it's not farm to fork; it's fork to farm. Till you don't understand that part, that farmers are going to react to market signals. We will not have a good policy, and that's the problem with farm policy. Is that people who are making farm policy, the people who are deciding the future and fate of people I'm trying to represent, don't understand agriculture. They don't want to understand agriculture, and they think they're God's gift to mankind.
Wow. Okay. And, all over the world now, and I think in some parts of India, technology is making an entry into agriculture. I'm told, and I'm not, informed adequately, I'm told that one of the reasons technology is not coming into Punjab, Haryana is because of the very small land holdings. What are your thoughts?
No, I think Punjab land holdings are a little larger than rest of the country's land holdings.
Okay.
So it's a little different. But it's not about technology is going everywhere. Basically, one of the things that we see about technology, we always overestimate the benefits of technology. And technology in terms of weather advisories, technology in terms is now beginning to also give us ideas on what would you say, price discovery and on precision farming, on how to save water. So it is happening. It's nothing that Punjab, it's not getting and other states are getting. I think so. It's slowly seeping into the lives of rural lives and livelihoods. But we have to be very careful. Technology is like a knife; it cuts both ways.
Correct.
For example, a lot of data has been generated of landholding data from Aadhaar, from the central government transferring some cash doles. So a lot of data, farm loan waivers and XYZ, so a lot of data has been generated, which the central government has. So now the central government, what I read from newspapers, is going to be monetizing that data by giving it to corporate houses.
Okay.
As a farmer, I think this is the greatest daylight robbery on earth.
Okay.
Because companies like Google, Amazon, Alibaba and all, they have they have become big on data. And it's data that you have collected free of cost because you are governing us.
Correct.
And you cannot give that data to these big companies for them to become bigger oligarchs. And I really think so. There is a technology component to it, but it cuts both ways. We really need to understand that. At some stage, fossil fuels was the greatest technology that came to the planet, but it's a cause of climate change today. So it's you got to have, you got to look at technology
Correct.
in a larger perspective.
Yeah, you need to have checks and balances for everything. I
Yes.
guess. So, Ajay, let's talk a little bit about the current issue of the MSP. What are your comments on these three laws, and what are the solutions?
I think the solutions are very difficult to talk about, but basically, people who are receiving MSP fear that they will lose it. People who are not receiving MSP want it,
Correct.
and the government is clueless in what to do about it.
Okay.
And it needs a longer term approach. It needs a longer term vision. It's definitely. I think the government understands that farmers will need to be supported, and I believe farmers will need to be supported in perpetuity.
Absolutely.
Any of these consulting firms that you get from outside, India, these international firms, they keep telling you about making farmers self-sufficient and XYZ. It's not going to happen. Farmers will need to be supported. The question is how best to support them: by input subsidies, by price risk, by giving insurance of price risk, or by support in market prices. So this is a much bigger. We need another discussion on this.
I agree with you. And I completely agree. Farmers are supported not just in India, all over the world.
Yes.
I mean, this is a very major point for discussion at the WTO, because even the soya farmers in America are supported. So I agree with you. So two more questions. Relating to farmers. One is, as a farmer from Punjab, what is the reason for the stubble burning, and that seems to choke almost all of North India? And why can't this be brought under control?
So let's say, why are people burning? The agriculture research system in India, that would include universities, and that would include ICAR, Agriculture Ministry, for generations, for 40 years, 50 years, they've told us, clean your fields before you plant your next crop. They've told you, burn your crop, burn your stubble, burn your burn the residue, have a clean ground, and then you plant a new crop. Now, all of a sudden, there is a hue and cry because of pollution, and the government and the public and media that caters to the urban classes is telling us Punjab farmers are culprits. They should not be burning. I completely agree. We should not be burning, but something that you have learned over 50 years is going to take time to unlearn that.
Correct.
And I think farmers are already doing it. There is a substantive change that is happening. Hopefully, we will reach a tipping point where it will take where it'll become a story of its own without government help. But I think the central government needs to support this for the next 5 years, and we will make a transformative change. But you have to understand, till you don't blame the people responsible, you will not find solutions. The same people who gave us the problem are now giving us the solutions. That doesn't work like that. You can't do it like that. They've got to acknowledge that it's their fault, and this is how we do it. They have to design policies in consultation with stakeholders, those who are trying to benefit. So, that's what needs to be done.
Yeah. So someone told me that, one of the reasons of this stubble burning, which is happening more recently, is that because of the genetically modified rice crops.
No, there is no genetically modified rice crop.
Or there
I think
isn't.
so. There's nothing like that. It's just that there is no profit coming out of the farms. And diesel has become very expensive. And I think farmers are paying a tax on diesel consumption of something like around a 5-acre farmer, I think, in Punjab is paying the central government and the state government a tax of maybe nearly 10,000 rupees, I think, per year on use of diesel. So I think even if the government was to repurpose the tax they're collecting from farmers on using diesel, would be enough to pay for stubble burning coming under control very much faster. It basically comes to economics. Can you make enough money to change your practice? That may be a little more expensive and a little more risky, maybe.
Very well said. Very well said. So one more question for you, and this is a question related to millennials. Millennials, our country's future belongs to the millennials. There are so many millennials in the agricultural world. What is your view on the attitude or the interest of millennials getting into farming, and what kind of futures are they looking for?
See, if you look at the next generation of farmers, 95% of them don't want to do farming,
Okay.
right? And let's not delude ourselves by looking at newspaper articles or someone is being projected in the media by here's a youngster who's done an MBA and he set up a greenhouse and this is the success story. Somebody set up vertical farming. I mean, these are nice to hear. These are nice to feel good about it. But they are not even a drop in the ocean. And these people are sustained not by incomes that come out of agriculture. These people are sustained by incomes that the parents have made money on. They have venture capital funding. It's good to see if they'll still be around 10 years from now, But let's see how long they sustain. But generally, it's not a happy feeling. People want to leave farming because it's not profitable. It's menial work. It's hard work. It's a lot of risk. And people would prefer to have desk jobs. And that's the hard reality. And the education that we have in this country is not preparing people that they are worth getting an employment.
Okay.
So it's a bigger problem, but it's not a happy story. It's not at all a happy story of what you read in newspapers.
Okay. So now I'm going to move to a couple of questions. I have time for two more questions for you, and I'm going to ask you some questions for you personally.
Oh.
So Ajay, so many things you've seen, successful farmer, led such large organizations, great opportunities and careers ahead. What does success mean to Ajay?
I think success is something what it means to me, and I think so must be true for a lot of other people. It keeps changing what it means.
Correct.
As circumstances change, as you mature, as your understanding improves, or as your priorities change in life, I think what success means changes. But today I would say that success would be that I have a happy family, my children are good, and I keep to my whatever I'm trying to do good for the farmers. I'm successful in trying to get better policies and trying and just being good, and trying to do good and achieving something that the farmers organization wants to achieve, and that is mitigate distress and improve farmer prosperity.
Terrific.
It's not something that's static, that once this is success and it'll mean the same thing to you all your life.
It keeps changing at every stage of life. Absolutely right. And as we get older, meaning of success also keeps changing completely. So my last question to you, and this is a question on failure, and I love to ask this question because I have a new book coming out on failure. And I've very often said that in India, as parents, we don't teach our children it's okay to fail.
Yeah.
Right? It's always first aana hai, line mein aage raho, etc., etc. Yet we fail all the time. My question to you is, what has been some of your biggest learnings from some of your biggest mistakes?
Okay, let's start off by saying my biggest mistakes is I should have studied more in school.
Okay.
That's one. I should have been a better student.
Right.
And not being good at economics or mathematics takes a toll on my farmer advocacy. Okay. Because when I have to talk to people who are good at economics, who are good at articulation, then it creates a stress. And why it creates a stress is because lots of these people are lying actually, and till you're not good at their subject, you cannot catch them at what they're doing. And I trust too easily. I try and multitask. I lack the capacity to say no very quickly, and these are my reasons of failure, and I've not been able to improve upon them. That's the bad part. Like I've learned from my failures, but I've not been able to do much about it.
Correct. Well said. Ajay, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you. I wish you well, and I wish everything you're doing for the farmers lots and lots of success. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me here on your show. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Just search for the brand called You.